On today's show, the Hawks fall short in Charlotte thanks to some very poor shooting, in particular from the standout guards on the roster. And there are other things to discuss as well from the first of 82 games that are scheduled for the Hawks this year. It is an 0-1 start, and we'll talk about it all in detail coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1575 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night here on a Wednesday into Thursday. And today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use promo code LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. And also at the top of the podcast, I always encourage you, and I still will today, to make us your first listen each and every day on the show. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify, as well as Overcast, Google Podcasts, and we're also on YouTube on the video side. And speaking of which, I'm coming to you live from Charlotte, where I was up in the sort of facility at the Spectrum Center, talking about, discussing, watching, taking it all in with regard to what became a 116-110 loss for the Hawks on the road in Charlotte to begin their season on a less than spectacular note for sure. The Hawks actually won their last four openers in at least four seasons in a row before this, but that streak has now come to an end. They led by as many as 11 points in the first half. They're at 4 in the fourth quarter at one point against a team that's not as good as the Hawks are, and you're not supposed to lose those games. But in the end, the big takeaway, we'll talk about this a lot in the next few minutes, is the offense just was not good enough, mostly from Trae Young and Dejounte Murray, and also just three-point shooting, really gross across the board. That was the number one and number two reasons why this ended up being a loss for the Hawks. There's still more to talk about than that for sure. That's kind of where I want to start today's podcast. And really, that's sort of the recipe to lose a game that you shouldn't lose. And that's basically what happens when you just cannot get a shot to go down. And then defensively, as Quinn Snyder talked about after the game, sort of the tendency is to let up a little bit when you can't score and you can't make shots. That kind of happened in the fourth quarter. It was a perfect storm in some respects. But even then, big picture, it's a narrow loss on the road. Yes, the Hawks were favored in this game, as we'll talk about in a second more, but not by a ton. And Charlotte at full strength is not a terrible team, etc. Still, it was unsatisfying, I'm sure. And I want to begin talking about the offense with a little bit more depth. Now, in the end, the Hawks had a 107 offensive rating in this game, which is very poor. And it was actually much worse than that for a large portion of this game. While the Hawks were on the short end of this, they scored 37 points in the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter was basically a bonanza of offense on both sides. And even then, the Hawks were not able to make a ton of threes in the fourth quarter. But for the most part, the offense was just very unsatisfying. And for an offense-first team, you can't really withstand that. The headliner, again, is probably the fact that the Hawks were 5 of 29 from three-point range. That is, of course, 17%. You're going to lose when that happens more often than not in the NBA. They also were 3 of 10 in the fourth quarter, which is better than that. Actually made the numbers look better. They were 0 of 10 on corner threes. Those are supposed to be the easier ones, the more high percentage shots from three-point range. 0 of 10, they're usually not self-created, open shots. Also not enough attempts. 29 attempts per game last year would have been second lowest in the league. So they're going to want to get up more of them. I'm sure Quinn's talked about that already to the team in post-game. But you obviously have to make some of those, and I want to at least note that. And then from there, Dejounte Murray and Trae Young combined to shoot 7 of 33 from the floor and 2 of 12 from three. 7 of 33 from the floor. They weren't alone by any means. But this is a team built on offense around those two guys in particular. It's not impossible to win when they struggle, but it is much, much harder for the Hawks to succeed, especially on the road, when both of them don't have it, and they didn't have it in this game. Elsewhere, the Hawks did shoot reasonably well inside the arc and had 58 points in the paint. So it wasn't like totally off the rails there, but it wasn't good enough. They had good rim frequency, but also missed some shots around the rim, particularly in the first half. They were 10 of 28 from floater range and mid-range. That's very much below average, so they couldn't get really anything to go anywhere. They got some good fast break stuff in the first half, but I think they kind of calmed down a lot after halftime. They did pretty well on the glass offensively in this game. And the bright spot on offense was probably the free throw line. They actually got 33 attempts. That's a lot for this Hawks team. Some pretty aggressive stuff in there, but they just could not make a shot. And then that's not necessarily sophisticated analysis, but it really was true in this game. It was a little bit clunky at times, a little bit less movement and egalitarian stuff than we saw in the preseason, which is certainly to be expected on some level. I think especially when Capella and Hunter were on the floor together, was a little bit clunky there, but I think it was much more about just poor shot making and the fact that Trae and Dejounte just had rough games at sort of at the same time. That's not going to be easy to overcome. In fact, no one on the team made multiple threes in this game. The only guy who shot better than 25% was Jalen Johnson, who was 1 for 3. So there you go. Defensively, it was not too bad till the fourth. The fourth was not fantastic, which we'll come back to later on. But they held the Hornets to like a reasonable number, about 112 offensive rating. That's not good, but it's not disastrous. But they were just much better as far as shot making was concerned. Charlotte actually was 12 of 17 from floater range. That's 97th percentile. They made a lot of relatively difficult shots around, not necessarily at the rim, but around the rim. They were also 97th percentile on all twos away from the rim. So basically all the stuff from 3 feet to the end to the 3-point line was strongly in favor of Charlotte. There's some noise in there as well. They did have 34 assists. They moved the ball very well. The Hawks were not great defensively. They were better early on and then they were late, but that was not really the bigger problem in this game. Quinn did note after the game that he liked the defensive effort, generally speaking, which I tend to agree with, and really was not sort of on film as well. But he did say, and I will definitely say this as well, they had trouble containing the ball, keeping it in front of them, and that's been an issue for a long time with this Hawks team. The perimeter defensively is not fantastic. It's been probably their single biggest personnel weakness in the last year plus, and that's still the case on this roster despite some of the hope of internal improvement, et cetera, et cetera. Before we talk about the observation from this game, some additional context that's probably important here. This is actually the first time the Hawks opened the season in Charlotte since 2000, so that's a long time. But it has not been a kind venue for Atlanta. The last 3 years, of course, they played there twice in a row. Started twice every year. They were 3-3 in Charlotte. That's not too bad, but they had lost 7 in a row before that. So they're actually now, I believe it is 3-11 in the last 14 trips to Charlotte. Not great. The Hawks were 4-point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel, in this game because Charlotte had some injury issues. And, of course, the Hawks are just presumed to be better than the Hornets. And I agree with that, but not necessarily on this night. And, by the way, one note on the availability for the Hawks. We did talk about this yesterday on the show on the preview, which had my final predictions in it as well. But Wes Matthews was already ruled out for this game with a calf strain. But the Hawks announced later in the day on Wednesday that he actually had an MRI that revealed that calf strain. He's actually going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. So reevaluation does not mean return. I always say that on this podcast, but it's certainly the case, which means Wes is going to be out for a while. Not that he was going to play. I do believe that the 9 guys who played in the game tonight, which we'll talk about later on, were going to be the 9 guys who played no matter what. But I do think that I was kind of thinking that Wes Matthews might be the 10th at times if they needed another guy, but not for the next 2 weeks. So we'll see, at least the next 2 weeks. So perhaps an opportunity for somebody else, Garrison Matthews or whoever you want to point to, Kobe Buffkin perhaps. But no Wes Matthews for a while. And we'll see how they sort of handle that if they have to go beyond the top 9 in the near future. All right. With all of that said, we'll have more of the detail on the observations from this game, how the game sort of flowed back and forth along the way. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Ibotta, and big holidays mean big family get-togethers. You have to spend all that money on Thanksgiving spread without getting something back in return, and that's where Ibotta comes in. With Ibotta, you get your turkey and all your favorite sides for free. Starting November 1st, for the 4th year in a row, Ibotta is giving you 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast. Add the offers in the app to redeem everything that you actually might need to make your Thanksgiving feast complete. All you have to do is shop at your favorite retailers and upload your receipt. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of different grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods. Make sure you're beating the inflation no matter what you happen to be purchasing. Other apps give you points that don't actually amount to much. With Ibotta, though, you get real cash back. You can cash out to your bank account, to PayPal, or to gift cards. You can also earn cash back on hundreds of different online brands and retailers, too, when you're operating with Ibotta. That includes places like Lowe's or Macy's or Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Download the Ibotta app right now. Use promo code LOCKED to get 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving dinner starting November 1st. Go to the App Store or Google Play Store right now. Download the free Ibotta app and use the promo code LOCKED when you get there. That is IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use promo code LOCKED. Check out Ibotta today. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, and PrizePicks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. And at PrizePicks, you pick 2 to 6 players and choose whether they have more or less than their PrizePicks projection. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. And at PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers, no competing against other people, just you against the projections. An entry there can be made in just 1 minute or less, which makes life very much easier for you. And PrizePicks offers improved deposit and withdrawal experiences, including the option to use Apple Pay for quick deposits. PrizePicks offers frequent discounts, bonuses, and other exciting offers, including weekly promos like Taco Tuesday and Flex Friday. And they have a huge selection of sports and stat types not offered anywhere else. They offer projections on the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, and many more sports. They're operational in more than 30 states now, plus Canada, plus PrizePicks is the best way to have action in more than 70% of the country. I've really enjoyed checking out PrizePicks during baseball season this year, and for the first time, honestly. And now I'm looking forward to this all the way through the NBA season, as well as through football season, etc. There's plenty of offerings at PrizePicks. It's really an awesome experience on the whole. It's easy, it's fun, and I highly recommend it. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. One more time, that is PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA when you get there. Check out daily fantasy sports made easy with PrizePicks. All right, now we'll dive into the observations and the sort of game flow in this one. The first two buckets of the year actually were ironically mid-range jump shots from Trae and Dejounte, both of whom missed a lot of shots in this game. Neither were bad shots, but it was kind of funny after all the talk about threes and attacking the paint, and also foreshadowing how bad they were the rest of the night. Dejounte was covering LaMelo Ball early on in the game. Trae had him as well at times due to some matchup concerns. I thought that they actually got a nice matchup with Hunter against Ball at one point. Basically went right through him. It was very sloppy on both ends of the floor from both teams actually early on. The Hawks were 0-5 from 3 in the early going, 3 turnovers, kicking around a little bit. Charlotte had the first big run, 11-4, prompted a timeout. Rotationally, it was exactly what you expect, at least what I expected. It was Bogey and Jalen as the first two subs for Saddiq Bey and Trae Young. Got later on, Jalen came back actually played with Capella. That was interesting to see. Then Griffin for Hunter, Congo for Capella. Capella actually got hit in the face, went right to the locker room, and Quinn said he was sort of proud of he stuck it out and was able to come back in the game. But usual stuff there. And then Trae came back in to echo the second unit later on, but it was a 9-man rotation. It was the 9 that we all expected, so no further analysis to give really at this point in time on that front, other than the fact that Snyder talked about after the game kind of what I've been saying a lot on this show, but I know there's a lot of focus on the starting lineups. It was Saddiq Bey starting this game. No surprise there after the finale of preseason, which we kind of speculated was going to be the case. But basically, Quinn talked about how it's not a binary. And we saw in this game even, both Saddiq and Jalen played 29 minutes. That's plenty for those guys. I know that everyone wants to see more Jalen, and he was probably the only bright spot. It was the biggest bright spot in this game for sure. But it's not necessarily like they had to play a certain amount of minutes. Like they're both able to play together if they need to. So there's plenty to go around, I would say. And Quinn was kind of sharing that message after the game. Hawks had a nice response after the Charlotte run, a nice finish from AJ Griffin in the early going, and then a lob from Bogey to Jalen. They actually had 3 straight dunks at one point in the first quarter. 2 of them were by Jalen, including one that was very funny where Trae kind of stumbled on a fast break. And I wasn't sure if he was throwing a lob or not. He threw it off the backboard. Jalen was way behind him, but actually still made the play to catch and then gather and dunk. Bogey had a pretty shocking dunk in transition as well. Wasn't surprised that he actually made the play, but I was surprised that he dunked it. The Hawks were leading early on despite poor shooting. Of course, they cooled off even more so from there. It was Trae and the other bench guys in the second quarter, other than Bogey came back in for AJ Griffin at the 3 actually for a while. They pushed him tempo much more often in the first half, which was good to see. Defensively, a little bit of a hiccup in the middle of the quarter. They finally made their first 3 after 17 minutes, and it was actually kind of ironic again because of all the stuff I talked about earlier with all the bad shooting. I thought the worst in terms of like percentage likelihood of it going in 3-point attempt the Hawks had probably in the whole first half was the first one they made, which is kind of funny. They were 0-7, and Jalen Johnson, it wasn't even a terrible shot. Like, I'm not saying it was awful, but it was a off the dribble, like semi-contested 3 by Jalen, who isn't necessarily an established shooter at this point in time. And they'd already missed a bunch in a row that were pretty good looking shots. So it's kind of just, variants in a nutshell. They're up to as many as 11 points. The bench, that was their best stretch of the entire game, was the middle of the second quarter, where it was kind of the bench plus Trae. And they were flying around. Bogey and Jalen played 14 minutes in a row, basically. That was interesting to go kind of see that. But they let down late in the first half when the starters started to come back in the game. Trae was very bad at the end of the first half, like notably missed a bunch of shots on the perimeter, turnovers, etc. Offensively, it was really rough. They were 1 of 12 from 3 in the first half. Again, it didn't get much better from there. Jalen had 13 in the first half. That was good to see. But they ran into a lot of Mark Williams in this game. I thought he was quite good, actually, for Charlotte. Not a Hornets podcast, but I thought he was a huge deterrent at the rim in this one. Defensively, it was pretty good from the Hawks in the first half. In fact, they had 9 steals. They had 12 in the game. That's way, way, way more than their average. So they were at least active there, but that was kind of the only bright spot was the defense in the first half. After halftime, a couple of blown communications assignments. In fact, this is one that Kevin Chouinard of Hawks.com showcased in this game. kind of left LaMelo Ball open for a 3-point attempt that kind of got him going. He had a pretty slow start in the first half. And I believe it was Murray and Hunter kind of blew a switch or blew a communication, and that left an open shot that kind of got his confidence up, it seemed like. Hunter had 4 fouls, actually, midway through the third quarter. They actually went back to Jalen pretty quickly at that point alongside Saddiq Bey, and then Bogey came in after that. The Hornets had a possession in the third quarter where they got 4 consecutive offensive rebounds. Some of those were kind of unlucky with long rebounds, but it's not what you want, obviously. Also, Hunter had a very bad non-box out that led to one of those rebounds. The Hawks were down by 7 at one point in time. A pretty ugly quarter on the whole. They lost it 27-21. The one bright spot there, Jalen Johnson had his career high in scoring before the end of the third quarter. Not something you often see. But the Hawks scored 21 points on 25 possessions in the third. That is very, very bad. 84 offensive rating. They were 30% or so from the field in that quarter. Just couldn't make a shot. I know I'm saying that a lot, but it really was the whole theme of the night in a lot of ways. In the fourth, it was better for a while. They had a nice high-low from Jalen to Okongwu for 3-point play early in the fourth quarter. They had a nice cut for 3-point play as well. It was actually a review for a flagrant foul, but it ended up being a common foul in the end. But the Hawks went up by as many as 4 points after a nice run. They got going a little bit. Trae was better in that stretch. They finally got one to go down with that Bey 3. They played some actually huge wing lineups. It was Hunter, Bey, and Johnson together at the 2, 3, and the 4. And Bey actually had 11 points in like 4.5 minutes in the fourth quarter. And then Okongwu was on the floor for that run. He got his 5th foul, came out of the game. The Hornets actually got hot once again from 3-point range and back-to-back threes. And despite a dunk in between them by Capella, it was still a pretty big swing in favor of Charlotte. They just kind of made more shots in this game. There was a timeout with 4:12 to go, and the Hawks down by 2. They were going with Johnson in place of Bey and the rest of the starters at that point in time, and that was the right choice. I mean, Jalen was if not their best player, I think he probably was their best player, but if not, he was certainly deserving of being on the floor. And Snyder has talked about this, and I actually kind of buy it that they're going to be looking at this. They're not going to have a fixed closing 5. I think there are 2 guys who are virtually assured to close games, and it's Trae and Dejounte. And the other 3 spots are pretty fluid between obviously one of Clint or Onyeka is going to be on the court, and then you got the combination of maybe AJ or Bogey, and then you throw in Hunter, Saddiq, and Jalen for 2 of those spots. So there you go. Anyway, the Hornets went up by 4 points after a dunk by PJ Washington trying to take a charge that Trae Young was trying to get in there, but didn't really work out very well for him. They dodged up actually a couple of open shots that they allowed to Charlotte in the fourth quarter, but Trae got a couple of good shots that just didn't get going to go. Murray missed one from 8 feet with about 2 minutes to go. That was a good look, just didn't have it go down. Suddenly they're down by 6 with like 1:30 to go. A pretty bad shot by DeAndre Hunter, a step back 3 that he missed pretty badly. Fortunately, that didn't really bite them. They got the offensive rebound and scored. But the next possession, Murray found Capella going to the rim, who kind of has to shoot that ball. I mean, he tried to overpass it. Ended up being a turnover. That was kind of a dagger in some respects against the Hawks. They still were kind of in the game because Trae hit a 3, which is exactly what they had to have. They were down by 6. They called timeout. They put Bey into the game, which they finally needed to do with either Bey or Bogey at some point to have more shooting on the court. But Trae made a 3 to make things interesting to get back within 3, but they couldn't get the stop that they kind of needed to. Terry Rozier got a floater to go up by 5, and they were kind of just like drawing behind the sticks, basically, is a Football Reference, and that was kind of the end of that. So they got a couple of again, I think Trae missed a 3 in the final seconds to kind of be ultimately dead, and that's pretty fitting because they just could not make a shot the entire game, including Trae. But the fourth quarter was their only bad quarter defensively. The Hornets shot 59% from the floor, and they were 4 of 10 from 3 with 10 free throw attempts in the fourth, led to 38 points. Again, the Hawks were scoring more in the fourth when they went more offensive lineups, but it was a bit of an adventure, let's just say. So all that said, I mean, the second half was what it was. It was the middle of the game that the Hawks really lost, not really the fourth quarter. I know they led in the fourth by 4 points, but they were up by as many as 11 in the first half, and it got away from them after that. So we'll talk about the plus minuses more in a second, but obviously the bench was better than the starters in this game. Everyone that watched the game knew that. Really the only starter who had a decent plus minus, -2 was Saddiq Bey, and because he played a lot with the bench. So anyway, we'll see that, I'm sure, flip sometimes. And look, one of the structures I would say that's core to this Hawks team this year is that they know, and they're leaning on this, that they're like 6 through 9. They're the guys who played off the bench in this game, but in particular, guys like Bogey and Okongwu, and then I would say throw in Jalen at this point in time. Those guys are better than the 6 through 9 on really most, if not all, teams in the league. That's a top 5 bench quartet I would say. So they're going to hope that the bench unit wins their matchups a lot, but the starters were bad in this game. And that also is tough to get overcome. And we'll talk about that more in a second. We'll talk about the individual player stuff that's coming up in a moment. But first, before we get to the individual player breakdowns, and we all do that on the podcast, by the way, at the end of the podcast after games, we talk about all the players who appeared and reference how they kind of played and my observations there. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Step into the action this NFL or NBA season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer, you can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with FanDuel. Beyond the awesome perks of right now signing up with FanDuel, they have all the stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space. That includes point spreads, over-unders, money lines, player props, future bets, and much more. The app is safe and secure at FanDuel. They cover the entire range of sports as well. They have the NFL, college football, of course, NBA, MLB, college basketball, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, you name it, it is there for you at FanDuel. They have all kinds of Hawk stuff as well. Live betting tonight in the middle of the game. Had a lot of swings there at FanDuel, I'm sure, but pregame over-unders, et cetera. And the Hawks will be facing the Knicks on Friday. You'll have all of your odds available for that game as well in advance of that tip-off for the home opener. And now is the best possible time to sign up at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and check out the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network with an offer that you absolutely do not want to miss. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, and to the individual stuff in this game, as I sort of talked about before the break, the bench was certainly more effective on the whole, at least when they were playing together in this game than the starters. We'll start there. AJ Griffin, as I referenced a few times in the last couple of weeks, actually, if you missed any of those podcasts, by the way, we are very busy on this podcast channel and have been all summer long. So if you're just finding us now, go back, listen to the preseason stuff, all kinds of good stuff there that still pretty much applies at this point in time. But anyway, as discussed, AJ Griffin is pretty clearly the 9th guy out of 9. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, he's a second-year player, but he played 10 minutes. He had 2 points. It was actually a very nice bucket that he had. 2 rebounds, had a turnover, but was fine. Just didn't play a ton, and that's okay. I think the Hawks, and Quinn Snyder's talked about this a lot, he likes to play 9 guys, and as far as like in comparison to more than 9 guys, if he can help it, AJ is 9 of 9, and that's okay. I think he's going to play, if not every night, probably every night, if I had to guess, but maybe a little bit minimally in close games like we saw tonight. Congo played 19 minutes. He was limited because he had 5 fouls, and that's been a topic that we've talked about a ton. I'm a big fan of Okongwu. I talked about that a lot this week on the show when he signed his extension. I love that deal for the Hawks. If you missed anything on that, that's my short answer, is that I thought it was an awesome deal for the Hawks side. But Onyeka does have a foul problem. It's gotten better every year. I will say that. It's improved his foul rate, but he had 5 fouls in 19 minutes tonight, and he was good when he played, but not dominant by any means. He had some shortcomings, but they were good when he was on the floor. He just wasn't able to play a lot because of the fouls. But 7 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists for Onyeka in 19 minutes. Bogey was hit and miss. 3 of 9 from the floor. He was not immune to the shooting stuff that everybody had in this game. 1 of 5 from 3. 7 points, plus 6 in his 24 minutes. Did have 3 steals. Active stuff there. He was not alone, by the way. Had 4 assists as well. Bogey helps the offense, but defensively, I thought he was kind of rough at times, which is not anything terribly new at this point, but I thought he was just okay. He's got to make more shots and or better defensively than he was in this one. Jalen Johnson, awesome night for Jalen. In fact, a career high. The Hawks had 2 career highs in this game. Neither one were by rookies. You don't often see 2 career highs in the same game, much less the season opener, but that happened tonight. 21 points for Jalen to lead everyone on the team other than Trae. 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 9 for 2 from the floor, 1 of 3 on 3. So he was actually 8 of 10 on 2s. Got to the line for 4 attempts, was 2 of 4 there. Look, I think people are prone to overstating things. Like there was a lot of talk about how he's their best player or whatever. He was the best player tonight, probably. I thought Jalen looked great. Is he always going to be this good? Probably not. But I thought he was very, very effective, and he jumped off the screen. Obviously, athletically, he is a marvel. He can't be matched with anyone on this team right now with his length and his burst and the way that he can go end to end. But I thought he looked great. So does that mean he has to start? No, obviously. I think that I would be okay, as I said before, if he did start. But I think that Quinn, I'm sure, saw this coming, where there's just too much talk about who starts. I don't particularly care. That's my opinion. But no matter what, if Jalen plays this well, he'll force himself on the floor plenty. 29 minutes in this game. Wasn't like he was underutilized. So he was by far the biggest bright spot in this game for the Hawks. And that's obviously fantastic in game 1 of year 3 for Jalen Johnson. To the starters. Saddiq Bey, 29 minutes, -2. That was the best in the lineup. 15 points and a career high 5 steals. He was very active with his hands. Defensively, that's obviously the big thing is the steals, but he wasn't great beyond that, but still played physically. I thought he played pretty well on the whole. Good to see him play well. DeAndre Hunter, 9 points in 31 minutes, actually fouled out, 4 rebounds and an assist. I don't think he was very good in this game. I don't think he was absolutely awful either, but I don't think he was very good. That's kind of where I would leave it for now. He was not necessarily terribly like aggressive as a ball mover in this game. A little bit more like back to stagnation than he was in the preseason, I thought. And then defensively, I thought he was fine, but he didn't make a huge difference either. No steals, no blocks is pretty typical for Hunter, but no turnovers. Like only took 1 or 2 bad shots. I don't think he was bad. He just didn't do a ton, like jump off the screen to me in this one. Clint Capella, 15.13 rebounds in 29 minutes. That's obviously just fine. I thought Clint was not particularly good, and particularly when you compare that to his counting stats. Like I thought he wasn't bad either, but him and Mark Williams, I think Williams was really good in this game, and I think Capella offensively a couple of bad moments, 1 bad turnover at the end, missed a couple of bunnies as well. Still shot 6% from the floor. Wasn't like he was terribly inefficient, but I don't think he was particularly awesome in this one, despite the fact that I think his shortcomings get magnified too much by people on Twitter, etc. But I thought that Clint was it was definitely not better than average for him by any means. And then the guards, like I talked about it before, but simply put, if you ask me one thing to say as far as why the Hawks lost this game, it was the fact that Trae and Dejounte were not very good. Dejounte, I thought, was very bad, actually. 11 points, did have 6 assists and 1 turnover. That's a good ratio, but defensively, he was not particularly good, and he was 3 of 11 on 2s. That's a terrible number. 0 of 3 on 3s. Obviously not a huge problem there, but he was not very good. Trae shot it even worse than Dejounte. 4 of 19 from the floor, 1 of 9 from 3. The bright spots, though, at least in comparison, I thought Trae was a little bit better than Dejounte. Number 1, the 9 assists, and also he got to the line 15 times. So Trae is going to be able to do that, and that's one of Trae's ultimate powers, that he can overcome some of his other challenges with getting to the line. But neither guy was very good. I thought Trae actually played pretty well defensively by Trae standards, but in the end, again, you cannot really take 7 of 33 from Trae and Dejounte against anyone, especially on the road. I know the Hornets are not like considered to be awesome, but I believe, as I said on the show recently, they're better than the people think they are probably. And I think that if you just said, okay, you know nothing else about this game other than the fact that the game is in Charlotte and Trae and Dejounte shoot 7 of 33, do the Hawks win or not? Do the Hawks win or do they lose? I would have said lose. So, it's not only that. I want to be very clear, but as far as takeaways are concerned, maybe number 1 on the list is the way that they shot it terribly in this one, to go along with the team, again, 5 of 29 from 3. All right. Well, that's all I have on this particular game. Look, big picture, it's 1 of 82. I know, and I said this on Twitter tonight, no one's going to love that answer. I understand that, but it is truly like overreaction season baked all into one here. It's the game. It's the first game of the season. It's a division team. You're on the road, so like it's already a point or two swing against you. Jalen played great, but other than that, prime for overreactions. The starting lineup didn't play well. That kind of feeds the beast when it comes to people not loving the way that Quinn operated the rotation in this game. And I didn't love what they did necessarily in the fourth quarter at times, other than playing Jalen down the stretch, which was a good idea. But look, it's 1 of 82. If they come home on Friday and get blown out at home, then you start to have your eyebrows raised. But look, it's one game, and they were only 3.5, 4-point favorites in this game. They weren't supposed to dominate. In the end, though, and it's something that I know my friend Dan Weiner actually shared with me on Twitter, and I agree. This is an example of what the Hawks have been poor at doing the last couple of years, and that's just beating teams you're supposed to beat. That's something the Kings did fantastically well last year. That's why they won 48 games. They just beat teams they're supposed to beat, and the Hawks have not done that very well. Now, again, I don't want to overreact. In fact, I'm not overreacting. I'm consciously not overreacting to one game in which the Hawks just could not make a shot. And look, Trae even said it from the podium tonight. And he said it in frustrated terms because he was obviously not very happy about the loss, but he basically said something like, he gave some of the numbers about the shooting and said, we're not going to do that very often. And I totally agree. This is a team that I'm not really worried about the offense. Yes, there is a chance this team is more like the 8th best offense like they were last year than the number 2 they were the year before. There's some nuance in there for sure. But I don't think they're going to have too many nights where they go 529 from 3, 0 of 10 from corner threes as a team, and then 733 from Trae and Dejounte. that's just kind of a perfect storm of bad. So there you go. I'm not particularly worried, and we'll see how they fare on Friday. Speaking of Friday, the Hawks will face the New York Knicks at home in the home opener on Friday. I'm sure that'll be a very raucous environment down at State Farm. New York actually lost tonight as well at home to the Celtics. Obviously, a little bit better of an opponent, but in a close game. And look, the Knicks are, for most people, projected to be a little bit better than the Hawks this year, according to FanDuel, according to some of the projections that you would see from national folks, et cetera. I had those teams pretty close together, to be honest with you, and it should be a good environment. But obviously, it will not surprise me if the Hawks are either underdogs or close small favorites in the game on Friday, despite being at home. So that's a good measuring stick game. The Knicks are, at least they were good last year. I think they're expected to be good this year. So that'll be a nice challenge, and we'll see how they handle that. We'll see if the same rotations involved. I imagine it probably will be after only one game. So stay tuned for that one. I don't know if I'll have a podcast in between those games. Probably not, unless there is news to touch on, because we had a very busy start to the week with the Okongwu news and all that stuff, predictions, etc. But still, this is the fourth show of the week, and I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast. We have been here all summer long. We will be here all season long. After every game, in the middle of games, interviews with guests and all that kind of stuff, analysis, level-headed, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the breakdown on this fine Wednesday evening. In fact, it's now Thursday as I'm recording this podcast, so please stay tuned. Please subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple, Spotify, also YouTube. Likes and subscriptions very much appreciated. 5-star ratings and reviews. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland if you'd like to. My Patreon stuff as well, written work, patreon.com/BT Rowland. I appreciate everybody listening to the show tonight, and we'll see you all next time.